Hello everyone, and welcome to Mr. Simplifies Tutorials. In this tutorial, we're going to look into consumer behavior models, and we're going to look into some detailed examples to simplify these models for you. Now, what is consumer behavior? Authors Leon Schiffman and Leslie Canuck defined consumer behavior as the behavior that consumers display in searching for, purchasing, using, evaluating, and disposing of products, services, and ideas which they expect will satisfy their needs. So consumer behavior is essentially a study of how individuals make conscious decisions to spend available resources like time, money, and effort on the consumption of different products and services. It includes what they buy, why they buy what they buy, when they buy it, where they buy it from, how often they buy the product or service, and how often they use it. The main purpose of studying consumer behavior is to understand who is more likely to buy your product or service, when they are likely to buy it, and from where. This, of course, can help organizations target the right consumers at the right time and also retain them. Now, there are two types of consumer models: traditional models and contemporary models. Traditional models are designed to understand consumers' needs by understanding their emotional wants and needs. Contemporary models analyze the conscious decision-making process of consumers instead of looking at their emotional wants and needs. Now let's jump straight into the individual models. As opposed to many tutorials on this topic, we will actually be looking into contemporary models first, with a practical example of each model. The reasoning for this is that traditional models are a lot simpler than contemporary models, and once you get a good understanding of contemporary models, understanding traditional models will actually get easier for you. And also, contemporary models are more relevant and more applicable in the modern era. The first contemporary model we're going to look at is the Howard-Sheth model. Now, this model states that a buyer's journey is a specific, methodical decision-making process wherein every stage of the process requires some level of problem solving by the consumer, and there are different variables that affect the different stages of the process. There are three stages in the model, and they are incremental. So you have to complete the lower stage to get to the higher stage. Now let's look at the stages. Stage 1 is called extensive problem solving. In this stage, customers know nothing about the product and are unaware of the options and the brands available. They actively try and find all possible information about the product and about the sellers and the brands. Since consumers in this stage think of their requirements as a problem, they are said to be in a problem-solving mode, and hence this stage is called extensive problem solving. The next stage is limited problem solving. Here, the consumers have more information about the product and the sellers and the brands. They can now start comparing the options and narrowing these options down. The next stage is called habitual response behavior. In this stage, consumers have a good knowledge of the products and all of the available options, and also of the USPs of the options and the sellers. They are now equipped to make a purchase that suits their requirements best. They make a purchase, and where applicable, they tend to go to the same supplier for repeated purchases. We now go into the variables that affect the different stages of the process, but what we can do is we look at an example before we get started on the variables, and we'll use this example throughout the explanation of this model. So, Barry has inherited an expensive watch and understands that he needs to safeguard it in the event of a theft. Although he knows that safes and security cupboards exist, he has little knowledge of them. So let's look at how Barry is going to understand what sort of safes exist, and then go into purchasing one. In stage 1 of this model, Barry started searching about what types of safes can be bought and started looking into if safes can be purchased online or just in store. He also starts looking into how secure a safe needs to be for his requirements. Now he goes on to the second stage. He has figured out that he can purchase them online, and he's also figured out what websites sell them and what level of theft and drill resistance he needs from them. He starts comparing his options. And in stage 3, having found the exact product of his liking in 2 suitable websites, he gets a final understanding of the levels of service provided by both companies by calling both companies, and he eventually finalizes the one that provided him the best answers to his query. Now let's look at the variables in play here. So the variables that affect this model are as follows: inputs. Like the name suggests, inputs are the factors that influence the consumer during the decision-making process. These can include social influences like friends, family, and colleagues, and other influences shaping up the mind of the consumer at this stage. There can also be an influence of marketing at this stage. In our example, Barry first saw an advert in social media and was later advised by a cousin to look for safes that provide some sort of damp resistance. So these are the inputs that were provided and that influence his decision making. The next variable is perpetual and learning constructs. In the simplest of languages, this refers to the individual's needs and preferences. And needs and preferences tend to stem from the individual's psychological makeup and perception. So hence it's called perceptual and learning constructs. In our example, Barry prefers safes with old school key locking rather than modern digital locking, and this is due to a previous bad experience. The next variable is outputs. Outputs is just the combination of the above 2 variables. This is the consumer's changed perception from the above 2 influences and the actions that the consumer takes as a result. The next influence is external variables. Now, these are influences that aren't directly related to the decision-making process, but will impact it nevertheless. So these are influences like weather and natural or political calamities. And now let's look at the next contemporary model, which is the Engel-Kollat-Blackwell model, also called the EKB model. Now, this model is simpler in comparison and states that consumers go through a 5-stage decision-making process before purchasing a product or a service. It's a model that is usually used when the market is very competitive and there are several people supplying similar products at similar prices. The 5 stages are as follows. Awareness. Now, this is the first stage where consumers would view adverts and understand the need or desire for a product or a service. The second stage is information processing. This is where consumers start evaluating the value the product or service would add to their lives. Consumers in this stage also tend to think about their past experiences with similar products or services. The next stage is evaluation. This is where consumers research into alternative options available and weigh in the pros and cons of the offerings that first caught their attention. So they compare it with the first offering. This is where competitor sites will be visited and reviews from other customers or analysts will also be considered. Stage 4 is purchasing decision. This is the stage where the consumer will buy the product or the service which has beaten the competition and has provided evidence of the best value in terms of price, quality, and the other expectations of the consumer. The consumer may also stop the process at this stage if their requirements or circumstances change. Stage 5 is outcome analysis. Once purchased, this is the stage where consumers use the commodity and assess the positive and the negative aspects of the whole experience. This is where consumers could actually decide if they want to keep or return the product if the experience, for instance, wasn't satisfactory. If they actually had a good experience, they could think of returning to the seller and providing them repeat business. We can now use Barry's example from above, from the previous model, to be applicable here as well. But instead of thinking of the psychological and social factors that influence Barry, this model would focus on the methods used to support his journey in each stage. The adverts that Barry sees in the awareness stage, for instance, could be paid adverts in Google, LinkedIn, or Facebook. When in the information processing stage, an easy to navigate website would help Barry to maybe evaluate the products on offer. In the evaluation stage, Barry would expect to read product and service reviews and gauge the offers provided by competitors as well. And finally, the after-sales service provided would ensure that Barry doesn't return the product after purchase. Now let's look into the next contemporary model, which is the black box model. This is also called the stimulus response model. It simply states that consumers process various internal and external stimuli and make purchasing decisions. It is called the black box because marketeers want to figure out what goes inside the mysterious black box, which is essentially the mind of the consumers. Essentially, they want to figure out what exactly happens inside the black box to convert stimuli into responses. This model is essentially a simple three-step process with stimuli and response being on either side of the consumer's mind or the black box. The first step consists of the stimuli influencing the consumer. This can be marketing stimuli or external stimuli. Marketing stimuli can be represented by the 4 P's of marketing: product, place, price, and promotion. So these are the stimuli provided by the sellers. External stimuli include factors like political factors, economic factors, social and technological factors, which are essentially aspects studied in a PEST analysis. Now, the 4P model and the PEST analysis are covered in detail in this channel, just for your information, and I will be providing links in the description for those who are interested. The responses on the other side of the black box are factors relating to the consumer's purchase choice: the product, the service, the brand, the purchasing time, the purchasing amount, the purchasing medium, or no purchase. So it's essentially what the consumer does at the end of the process. Now, the buyer's mind, the main component of this model, or the black box, is a combination of buyer characteristics like beliefs, values, needs, and lifestyle, and the buyer's decision-making process like information search, alternative evaluation, purchasing, and post-purchase evaluation. So it's essentially the black box that absorbs the stimuli and produces the outputs. Now, what we can do here is we can look at a graphic to simplify this model and then look at an example. So as you can see in this graphic, we have the stimuli, the black box, and the responses. The stimuli consisting of the 4 P's and the PEST analysis, which are external stimuli, and the black box, the core of this model, consists of buyer characteristics and the decision-making process of the buyers, and then the responses being either a purchase, wherein we go into specifics of the purchase, or no purchase. Now, applying this model to our example, Barry's mind is influenced by various marketing and external stimuli, but it's the combination of his buyer characteristics and his decision-making process that actually produces an outcome. Now, if Barry is someone who believes in high quality brands and making lifestyle purchases, he could choose a high-end luxury safe, which might actually be too much for his security requirements, but it satisfies the other requirements for him, and hence the outcome of his black box will be a luxury product. So you can very clearly see that there is obviously an influence of the stimuli, and the response produced is actually a combination of all of the influences and the decision-making process of the buyer. And now we move on to the next contemporary model, which is the Nicosia model. Proposed by Francesco Nicosia in 1966, the Nicosia model asserts that a business's marketing techniques are actually the main influences behind consumers' decision-making processes. This model doesn't focus much on the consumer's internal decision-making processes, and this is why many businesses would choose not to use this model on its own, but to use it alongside a different one. This model consists of 4 stages. Stage 1 is business and consumer characteristics. This is the initial marketing messaging the consumer is exposed to and the consumer's response to it depending on their beliefs and interests. For instance, Barry comes across and clicks on an advert on the advantages of moving his valuable personal data to the cloud while going through his LinkedIn feed. The next stage is search and evaluation. This is where a consumer would compare products or services based on the messaging delivered by all of the companies selling the products and services. In our example, Barry searches for personal cloud data storage options and compares the offerings of the multiple providers. Now, if the original company's marketing and messaging is right, it will not be forgotten by Barry. So Barry will look at other options, but will also remember the very first advert that is clicked on. The third stage is purchasing decisions. This is where the consumer finally decides to purchase the service with the company with the right messaging and offer. The fourth stage is feedback. This is where the company would assess the consumer journey and decide to alter its advertising or continue with the same messaging. In our example, if Barry purchases the service from the first company, the first advert that he clicked on, after looking at the other options, or despite looking at the other options, the advert can be seen as being successful by the first company, and they should actually continue backing the advert, providing more budget to the advert. Now let's look at the next contemporary model, which is the Hawkins Stern impulse buying model. This is a very interesting model which is an alternative of the EKB model and states that consumers don't always make purchases as a result of rational thoughts. Now, when we think about impulse buying, we can think of consumer picking up a packet of candies or chewing gum from the checkout area in a shop. Now, this model states that there are actually 4 categories of impulse purchases, which are as follows. The first type is escape purchase. Now, these are for items that the consumer didn't originally intend to purchase, but ends up purchasing because of appealing visuals. So, the chewing gum you picked up at the till would fall into this category. The second type is reminder purchase. Now, these are purchases made by consumers because of reminders placed in store by the sellers next to the popular products. So, the right type of in-store setup can promote reminder purchases. An example could be placing a small pack of crisps around the alcohol aisles. Suggested purchase. Now, these are similar to reminder purchases, but these are purchases resulting out of an active recommendation by a salesperson or even by an e-commerce algorithm. Now, we've all ordered products in Amazon, and we've also all seen products recommended to us by the algorithm, and these can be included under suggested purchases. Planned purchase. A lot of times stores offer certain products on certain prices, and what happens because of these is consumers would actually could actually wait for such items to be on offer and then purchase them. This type of purchase is a planned purchase, and certain stores provide apps where you can see items which are on limited time offers. So consumers could actually plan their shopping trips to match with these offers. And now let's explore some traditional consumer models, which laid the foundations for many of the contemporary models we've just covered. The first type of traditional model is the learning model, also called the psychological model. The learning model is based on Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, if you do want to understand Maslow's hierarchy of needs, please refer to the popular tutorial uploaded in this channel. The link is again in the description. Essentially, the hierarchy of needs is a psychological model where a pyramid is used to elaborate the priority of needs in individuals. The learning model implies that a person will essentially fulfill basic needs before moving on to more advanced needs. So the advanced needs are at a higher level of the pyramid, wherein basic needs form the base. For example, for a business that sells a variety of products ranging from clothes to food commodities, it's important to understand that a hungry person will buy food before looking to buy a tie. So the store will need to be arranged so that food comes to people's attention before clothing and anything else. If you think about it, retailers do arrange food items close to entry points. The next model is sociological model. Now, the sociological model elaborates that people are influenced by their social standings and interest groups. Interest groups can include friends, family, or colleagues. People tend to buy in accordance to their interest groups' habits, expectations, and tendencies. Certain types of businesses can benefit from this model by creating a customized consumer journey for certain types of people. Now, they know that certain types of people would buy certain types of items. For instance, a corner shop close to a social club could stock items that they expect visitors from the club to purchase, and this would add to their social experience. The next type of model is the psychoanalytical model. Now, Sigmund Freud, as we all know, can be considered to be the father of psychoanalysis. This model draws influence from Freud's finding that human behavior is driven by various conscious and unconscious motives, which are deep-rooted within their psyche. This model infers that purchasing habits are also influenced by such motives. For example, a lot of people have deep-rooted desires to be attractive to the opposite sex. Perfume brands tend to target consumers by proposing that the usage of their products could actually make people irresistibly attractive to the opposite sex. The next model is the economic model. Now, this model proposes that consumers tend to try and satisfy all their needs by spending the least amount of resources. Businesses can use this model by learning about the spending habits of consumers and specifically targeting certain types of lower priced alternative to specific types of consumers. Stores offering extra loyalty points on certain types of purchases depending on the consumer habits, spending habits, can be an example of these being used. Great, so that covers all of the consumer behavior models that we are going to look into in this tutorial. I hope this tutorial was beneficial to you. I thank you very much for your attendance to this tutorial, and please like this tutorial, please share this tutorial with your colleagues, your friends, and your family, and please take very good care of your own self. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.